I want to ask you to turn to Genesis 6. Now, we're going to actually, in our story narrative, we're going to go back to chapter 4 to catch up. But I would like to read together in chapter 6. And as I say, this is pretty brutal. We're going to get to and end our time mainly on the story of Noah and the flood. And what we find out when we actually study the story is it's not just about cute animals in a big boat. Isn't that right? There's some intense stuff going on in this part of the narrative. So I'm going to ask you if you're able and willing to stand as we prepare to read this together and then study the story and pick up where we've left off. And a few things haven't gone as planned this morning, including I skipped the prayer time. And that wasn't on purpose, I'm sorry. So what we're going to do, I want to ask you as we begin, prepare to read this, will you join me in praying our Master's Prayer? And then I'm going to pray over the Word and our time in the Word. So let's begin by just joining together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And Father, we come knowing that every part of that prayer that our Master gave us, it applies now, at your word, at his feet, as our teacher. And what we need now, and we ask for now, is even more important than bread, because we know you're right. We don't live on bread alone, but every word that comes from your mouth. We know that this word shows us our need for forgiveness. It shows us our need to forgive. It shows us how hallowed you are, how holy and how high you are. So please, Lord, unlock through your word reality for us, that we might more and more be the people you created us to be. The people who are like Jesus, your Son. We pray this in his name. Amen. Let's read together in Genesis 6. I'm going to read verses 1 through 14. And there's a lot after that goes with the story, but we only have so much time. Okay, one more disclaimer. When I read the beginning of this, there's some weird stuff that raised a lot of questions. I'm not going to deal with that this morning. Not because it's not important, but because that takes us a whole different rabbit trail that we don't need to go down. Okay, so if I read the first few verses and you're like, what? That's okay. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Anyone like, what? Then Yahweh said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. There's a footnote there that says that could also say corrupt. They are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. What? They were the heroes of old, the men of renown. Yahweh saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Yahweh regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Those two verses right there, I mean, do they lay you low? Wow. So Yahweh said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I've created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah, we're so glad this sentence is in there. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. That's another doozy. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood or gopher wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out. Thank you. You may be seated. We're going to end the reading there, but of course the story keeps going. Now I'm going to review, and I'm going to try to do it super quick, because the further we go, the longer it takes to review, and the less time we have for the new things we're doing. Just to remind you, we've looked at the fact that there's a new creation already underway. God's determined to get it done. He's already in it, right? And we're a part of that new creation. It's going on the inside of us. The rest of creation has to wait a bit longer. And then we looked at the 7 elements, or at least 7, I'm sure there's more, elements of God's original creation that point to his intentions for the new creation. Just wanted to flash this up to remind you. He made it very good. It was meant for life. He is the personal and present God the whole time. He built it for community. It was covered in blessing. We were made in the image of God, we humans, and we humans were made to have authority to rule under God. Then we looked at what sin did to that. And that was not so cheery. It's kind of like what we read this morning. It went from very good to very negative, whatever word you use. Went from life being the center of it to death reigning. The personal present God was still there, personal and present, but now we're afraid of him and hiding from him. Instead of having a community, we're afraid of each other and hiding from each other. Instead of being covered by God's blessing, we now have a curse covering us. And though we're still made in God's image, we are taking on to ourselves the enemy's image. And though we were meant to be ruled to bless, we now have the tendency to rule to possess. It's been quite a 5 weeks, hasn't it? So we're going to continue the story, and we're going to start in chapter 4 with something I've read just a few times, but we need to take just a closer look. And I was talking to a brother and sister last night and saying, there's so much here that you want to get down at the ground level and really look deep, but you have to kind of stay at 10,000 feet right now. I need to, because otherwise we could be here for like 5 years just digging it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at some details, but what I ultimately want to do together is keep going through the narrative kind of at the 10,000 foot level, because I want you to see the new creation unfolding. That's the whole point of this. It's not just to study the Old Testament. It's to see what's God been doing. Because remember, we're joining him in his work, right? This is not academic. We're training for something that we're doing with God, Father, Son, and Spirit. And so what we want to do is see how have they been doing it? What have they been up to? What are their priorities? How do they deal with the sin problem? And as we watch what they're doing, we're learning how we can partner with them. So look at me with Cain. As you can see, he's corrupt. Now, most of you know the story, and it's terrible. Cain brought an offering to God. He's the oldest son of Adam and Eve, the first member of the second generation of humanity, right? Oldest boy. He brings an offering. He works out in the crops. Abel's his younger brother. Now, as far as we know, they've got a bunch of other siblings, because Adam and Eve didn't just have 2 kids, right? It says they had sons and daughters, a bunch of kids. And by the way, this comes up later, but they lived a really long time. Have you looked at how long they lived? Like average of 900-ish years. That's another one you're like, what? Now, if you live that long and have a bunch of kids for that long, how many kids could one couple have? A lot, okay? Just think of it. If you had a kid every 10 years, once you started 50, how many is that? Like 85 kids or something. Yeah, the population is going to grow. So anyway, there's at least 2 kids we're going to look at, Cain and Abel. Now, as I say, Cain works in the crops, Abel works with the animals, with flocks. He's a herdsman. They both bring an offering to Yahweh. Whose offering is accepted? Anybody? Abel. Whose is rejected? Cain. Now, how does Cain react to that? He's a pouty baby. That's how he reacts. And you're wondering, why was one rejected and one was accepted? Well, a lot of people speculate that maybe Cain didn't bring a meat offering, actual bloodshed. No, there's no reason to think that. He has never told them, as far as we know, that you're supposed to kill animals for an offering. So there's no reason to think the offering itself was bad. There's one little clue that Cain just brought some of the crops and Abel brought the fat portions. So maybe that's something about it. But I got to tell you, when you look at what God said to Cain when he was being a pouty baby, look at verse 6. It says Cain was angry and his face was downcast. So then Yahweh comes and has a personal, private chat with Cain. Listen, please hear this. God had kicked humans out of the garden because of their sin, but was he done with them? Obviously not. He's talking to Cain one-on-one. And he's not talking to him to bring the hurt. He's not talking to him to be mean. Listen to how Yahweh speaks to Cain, even though they've been kicked out of the garden, even though they've sinned and become corrupt. He's still there. He's still with them. Oh, it's so great. He says to Cain, why are you angry? Isn't it, okay, parents, does this not sound like how you might talk to your child if they're being grumpy? Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you don't do what's right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. And what this seems to indicate is what Yahweh is saying is, Cain, your lifestyle is such that I can't accept your offerings. You don't do what's right. Now, does that pair up with the rest of the story? Does Cain seem like the kind of guy that doesn't do what's right? Yeah, because what does he do with his grumpies? He kills his brother. Now, most of us, when we get grumpy, don't do that. Like, this guy is messed up. Now, after having a personal interview with Yahweh where he warns him ahead of time, don't do this, Cain. Like, Yahweh knows. Okay, he sees. Cain can't hide what's in his heart. So Yahweh's given him ahead of time this warning, don't do it. Oh, Cain, my boy, don't do this. And Cain leaves that conversation, and we don't know how long it took, but what does he do? Sin ruled over him. He let sin take over, and he kills his own brother. Now remember what we've looked at. God created each human being in his own image, yes? And God breathed his life into human beings. Like, this human being creature is pretty remarkable, pretty outstanding on earth. And what Cain had done had become so corrupted by sin, had become so self-absorbed in his sin, that he could take this incredible creature of God, made in his image, bearing his likeness, and just take him out. Just murder him. And God told him when it happened, after it happened, listen, another personal interview with God, God comes up to Cain and says, where's your brother Abel? Does this remind you of Adam? Where are you? Right? Now, Cain does worse than Adam and Eve, though. Because at least Adam and Eve fessed up. At least they admitted what happened. They kind of blamed each other, but at least they said, I did something. Notice what Cain does. Face to face with Yahweh. What does Cain do? Bold-faced lie. Where's your brother? What do you say? Do you see it? What do you say? I don't know. Now, he does know because he killed him and either left his body there or put his body somewhere else. He knows exactly where Abel is. So when Yahweh asks, where's your brother? He's so fooled by sin. He's such an idiot now because of sin. He actually thinks he can lie to God. Sin does this to us, does it not? You think sin is just a moral problem. It's not. It messes with every part of your being. It makes you dumb. And he thinks he can lie to God. I don't know where he is. And it's not bad enough that he lies to Yahweh. He also gives him some lip. What does he say next? I don't know where he is. What? Am I my brother's keeper? Doesn't he sound like a teenager? I'm sorry, teenagers. Sorry. But I mean, this is kind of typical giving guff to your parents. No, don't do that. That's not okay. But I mean, isn't it? What am I, my brother's keeper? Why are you asking me where he is? Now, God, again, he knows exactly what's happened, and he's trying to give Cain a little room to admit it and fess up. I don't know where he is. What am I, my brother's keeper? And so God brings now a curse on Cain. Because, listen, God is still shepherd and ruler of earth. He cannot let this egregious sin go. And so he curses Cain. He says, the crops aren't going to grow for you. You've got to leave. You've got to leave your human family, Adam, Eve, and all the other kids and all the uncles, nieces and nephews. You've got to leave all of them. Be on your own. You're kicked out. Now, here's how absorbed in sin Cain is. After all of this, right? God gives him a curse. What's Cain's concern once God punishes him? Look at verse 13. My punishment is more than I can bear. Are you serious? You've murdered your brother. You've been found out. You've taken your parent's child away, all the children he could have had to increase and fill the earth with humans, all the contributions he could have made to God's creative process. Everything that Cain represented is now snuffed out, and God has brought it to your attention. And what is Cain's concern? I don't know if I can handle this, God. You see how warped sin has made this guy? His only concern is his own self. Even now, face to face with Yahweh, all I can think about is, this is going to be really hard on me. What a jerk. Now, God sends him away. Notice that when Noah comes out of the ark, this is going to seem out of order, but bear with me. When Noah comes out of the ark, God gives him freedom to now eat the flesh of animals. What's the one condition God puts on this? You may not consume their what? Blood, because life is in the blood. And then he says, if any human being sheds the blood of another and kills them, their life is forfeit, they should be killed. That's God's rule in his universe, right? Notice what happens here, though. That's God's way, and it comes later, but that's still in God's head at this point in the story, and when Cain kills his brother Abel, but does God take Cain's life? No. Interesting, Cain seemed to be aware of the fact his life is in danger, because notice what he said to God. If someone finds me, they're going to kill me. Me, right? And God would be very justified to say, yep, they're going to kill you, and that's what you deserve. But what does God do? He's so kind. Even to this monster, he's so kind. He says, you know what? I'll make sure they don't. I'll put a mark on you, and no one's going to kill you. Now, here's what I just wanted to point out about sin. Sin separates. And so Cain has been living with Abel and Adam and Eve and all the family that's growing in the human population just outside the Garden of Eden. They're all here, and Cain's with them in community, however twisted now. But now he's expelled. Where were they expelled from earlier? The garden. Now Cain is expelled even further. You see what sin's doing? Separating. The community is being broken down little by little by this horror called sin. Anyway, Cain does have a wife, and he starts to have kids. Here's what I want to look at together. Because here's the whole point, I think, in the big narrative of chapters 4 and 5. Adam has a bunch of kids, but here's two. I put the wrong name over there. Wow, that's embarrassing. Okay, on the left, your left, imagine that you're seeing the word Cain there. Just work with me. Okay. We're going to get to that guy Enoch later. So Cain and Seth are two people in the line of Adam, two of his kids. In chapter 4, we're going to follow the line of Cain. You're imagining that with me, right? Okay, so on the left we see Cain is one line, and on the right Seth is the other. Chapter 4 is about Cain. Chapter 5 is about Seth's line. Here's what we know about Cain's line. It's horrible. It's awful. And we only know about two people specifically, but they're bad. Cain is the first one. Now think about this, because I'm trying to think on the story as a real thing. If Cain is kicked out and he's all by himself with his wife and they have some kids, what kind of family do you think Cain would raise? Horrible. He doesn't fear God. He doesn't care about people. So guess what kind of family he's going to produce? Horrible. If you go down to the seventh member of Cain's family, sixth member, because it's the seventh generation from Adam, you get to a guy named Lamech. What kind of guy was Lamech? Well, he was a murderer too. And it seems like he's even more bold-faced about it than Cain was, his ancestor, because he comes home to his two wives and he boasts to them. He says, I killed the guy today because he hurt me. He said that. I killed a young guy because he injured me. And then he has the gall to say, if Cain was avenged 7 times, I'm going to be avenged 77 times. Is he laid low by his horrible crime? Is he repentant that he's taken a human life made in the image of God and all that? No. He comes home and he wears it like a badge of honor. If Cain was bad, I'm even worse. So in Cain's line, what is humanity looking like? Horrors. I mean, this is ridiculous. Now, interesting contrast. If you go over to Seth's line, oh, there's Enoch. When you go to Seth's line, we don't know many things about Seth's line either. 2 clues, though. If you look at the very end of chapter 4, it says, at that time, meaning after Seth had a son named Enosh, Seth was given to Adam and Eve Eve saw Seth, their new child, their new son, as a child to take the place of Abel because she lost her boy. And you can believe when Abel was killed, Eve was feeling sin like she had never felt it. She's thinking back to that crunch in the garden, thinking, what have we done? This is where it leads, right? Anyway, so Seth is born. He grows up and has Enosh. And look at that final sentence in the chapter 4. At that time, people began to call on the name of Yahweh. Don't really know exactly what that even means. What does it mean? They didn't call on his name before, or is there something different now in this generation of humanity? But in chapter 5, you follow Seth's line, and you're thinking, why Seth's line? Well, because he leads to Noah, and he's a pretty important fellow, okay? So we're going to follow Seth's line. If you get to the 7th generation through Seth's line, who do we find? Enoch. Now remember, through Cain's line, who is the 7th guy? Lamech. Horror. 7th through Seth's line is Enoch. Let's see what's true of Enoch. Verse 21, chapter 5, verse 21, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. Why is he famous? Oldest man on record, right? We don't know anything else about him, but we think he's cool because of that. Okay. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other kids. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. What does that mean? Because it doesn't say he didn't die. Interestingly, it does say every other person died in that whole line. It doesn't say he died, but it doesn't say he didn't die. All it says is God took him away, and he wasn't there anymore. Like, where did he take him? Did he go to Eden? Did he go to heaven? Did he go to Black Meshanan? Like, where did he go? Where did he take him? All we know is he didn't die the usual way everyone else did, at least. But what is the key thing about Enoch? He did what? He walked with God. Lamech, on the other side of the human story, what's he doing? Killing folks. Yet this man is walking with God. Now, what is all the point of all this? It's not just interesting human genealogy. I want you to know what God was doing in chapters 4 and 5. Please listen to this, because this is key for our working with God in his new creation. God was ensuring that his name would be in the human story. Did you notice that? They called on the name of Yahweh, and there's a man named Enoch walking with Yahweh. Yahweh's name and presence must be carried on in the human story. Because if you just leave it up to Cain and his line, it's gone. They don't care about Yahweh. They're kicked out of his presence. Cain even said, I'm going to be hidden from your face, Yahweh. What God's doing is he's making sure that in the story of humanity, his name, his reality, his presence is always felt. You think, well, duh, that's what God does. But don't say duh too quick. Listen, does God have to? We made our choices. We made our bed. We chose no God, yes, Satan. We chose no God, yes, self. And God had every right, as we saw in chapter 6, to say, well, never mind then. I regret this. I'm done. But he doesn't. He doesn't walk away. He doesn't turn his back fully on this race of corrupted beings. He said, I'm with you. And what's the evidence? If Enoch walks with God, what does that imply? God is walking with Enoch. Oh. Remember what God wanted to do with Adam and Eve in the garden? Walk with them in the cool of the day. Do you see that even though they're not in Eden anymore, they get to experience Yahweh like they would have in Eden, walking with him? Do you see this? Cain is one option we have. Seth is another option. Now we get to Noah. He's a couple more generations into the line. But notice the state of humanity at this stage. These words, every, only, and all, are from the verse that we read that was horrible in chapter 6, verse 5. If you fast forward from Enoch a few generations, he was a righteous man, but what's happening to the rest of humanity? Let's look at chapter 6 again, verse 5. Yahweh saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. is that not the most loaded sentence possible about sin? Look at the words used. These are words of extremes. Like, you can't get any worse than this. Every inclination, only evil, all the time. Whoa! And then you read what does it say in the next verse? Is this not the most frightening verse ever? Yahweh, and the word is literally repented that he made humans. Now, this is something horrible, but it does happen, and it shouldn't happen, but it does happen. Parents have sometimes said to their children, I shouldn't have had you. And that is the most damaging thing any human being could ever hear from their parent. Isn't that true? Like, what? My existence is regrettable? And so you might read this and think, that God, no, God, you're crossing lines now. But think on what we read in verse 5. Is it because God is brutish? Is it because God doesn't love? Think of how extreme sin has to be in for God, the loving heart of God, to go to that. Oh man, I'm rethinking this human thing. Now, one more thought before we move on to Noah. Before we get too carried away with judging God for his regret that he made man, think on this. God is not just in charge of humans. He's shepherding an entire creation, correct? And what are humans doing to his creation? Instead of ruling with his authority to bless his creation, all they're doing is wrecking it. That's it. They're killing each other. They're killing his earth. They're harming everything because sin is so rotten in them. So is it God's heartlessness that he would regret making mankind, or is he thinking, this is out of hand? They're out of hand. They're messing up my world. Now, because he's in charge of more than just humans, he's got to do something about it. You know, if it's just humans, well, let them take each other out, whatever. But no. If I let this go on, everything's in jeopardy. Everything. Because I put them in charge. So he decides he's going to have to take them out. But notice there's this man. Oh, we're so grateful for this guy. Here's what we know about Noah. He found favor in Yahweh's eyes. He's righteous. He's blameless in his generation. And he walked with God. Does that sound familiar? Oh, he's walking with God. God's walking with him. There's relationship. There's community. Good. So there are traces of the creation intention still in this guy named Noah. But here's the thing. God's about to wash the entire planet in water. I was thinking about this because God has every option on the table. Like, he can use anything he wants to destroy life. I mean, you know, if God creates everything, he can use anything. He could have created a few more elements to use if he wanted to, but he chose water. Think about why. Why water? Think about what water does. Water washes, it purifies, it cleanses. Interesting connection, isn't there, to baptism? And as much potential as water has to do these good things, what else can it do? Obviously, and to destroy life, snuff it out. We've seen this actually in real time happening with tsunamis. We've seen it happening with children who don't have a gate around a pool. We know the danger that water can pose, but also the wonderful benefits water can bring. Interesting, isn't it? God chose water of all things to use because the world, the earth, was so polluted, so corrupted by the human sin problem. Interesting, he chose this element to deal with it. Let's wash it away. What's the problem, though? Just like in the waters of baptism, what's the problem? External cleansing does not really take care of the sin problem, does it? Anybody? When you go in the waters of baptism, is the water itself making you not sinful anymore? Nah, because you don't wear your sin on your skin, everybody. Amen? Where's sin? Where does it find its home? It burrows into your inner being, and there is no amount of water in the entire planet, above or below. Remember, water came from above and below. How else do you cover the earth in 40 days? But there's no amount of water anywhere that can change the human heart. So God knew that. It's not like he thought, hey, if I just kill all humans except these 8, everything will be hunky-dory. No. But think on this with me, because this is exciting. This is good. And this gives me visions of God's eternal intentions in his new creation. So think with me on the parallels here. The world is corrupt. That sounds familiar. Not just ancient world, right? Am I right? Yeah. So the world is corrupt because humans are corrupt. So God decides, I'm going to start a new humanity, so to speak. I'm going to begin again with a new humanity, and I'm going to put at the head of that whole family the one righteous man that I can find. Any alarms going off? Any bells going off? Does that sound familiar to you? I've got a corrupt race of humans, every one of them. I'm going to find one righteous man, and I'm going to put him in charge of the new creation, humanity. Does this sound familiar? Isn't it the most exciting reality ever? God looked at this creation after the flood. We're all populating the earth. We're like 7 billion strong. We've never been more populated. Is the earth less corrupt? Well, technically, yeah, if you think about it. And it's all because of the gospel. It's not only every all anymore, right? There are pinpoints of righteousness in the world because of the gospel. But overall, the human condition, would you say it's righteousness? No. So God saw the corrupted planet, and he said, I need one righteous man to head up my new creation, humanity. Who did he choose? He chose Jesus. He chose Jesus. There was one righteous man. The only one, honestly. Look on the whole planet, and there's only one who's truly, deeply righteous, and it was his own son. And so just like he said to Noah, he says to Jesus, you're going to be the leader of the new humanity. You know what the best part is? Jesus didn't die. Well, okay, after he died the first time. Jesus doesn't die anymore. Noah had to die. And actually, even during Noah's lifetime, did sin creep back into the human story? Well, Noah got drunk, laid down, exposing himself. His son Ham embarrasses him, shames him. He's cursed by his father. It didn't take long, everybody. You can wash the world of all the sinful people and destroy the human population, but even in that little group of 8 humans, did sin still have a hold? Keep reading the story, and you'll find out how quickly sin took its hold again on the human race. So here's why God had to take a new tactic, and that's the whole point of this whole message. I wanted you to see how God dealt with it in that situation, because he's committed to the creation. But he knew it wouldn't work that way permanently. It was kind of a Band-Aid that he needed to use at that time because it was a clutch moment. But remember, God always had in the distant future in mind a more permanent solution to the problem. And instead of using a man named Noah, he would choose a man named Jesus. Wow. Do you know what Jesus' name means? It's in the Hebrew, Yeshua. Do you know what that name means? I hope you know. It means Yahweh saves. Think of yourself. Okay, Noah's the righteous one, but anyone who belongs to Noah gets to go on the ark and be saved and have life. Yes? Think on that. There's one righteous man, and anyone who belongs to him gets to be saved and have life. Now, I want to say one more thing about this. Because we focus so much on being saved from the terrible wrath, like a flood. God did promise never to flood again, and we're happy about that. But he did say it'll be fire next time. I'm not sure that's any better. But anyway, so there is judgment, and we are grateful to be saved from it. However, is that all there is to the story? Because it's not just like Noah and his 7 family members were on the boat forever. Remember when the waters receded, and they were in that boat for a long time. It wasn't just 40 days. They were in there like for over 150 days. Anybody else want to be on a boat full of animals for 150 days? I was in a car with 5 animals for 6 days, and that was too much. But listen, when the waters went down and they came out of the ark, what was given to them? A new world. A whole new world. That's the same world that was there before, but it's different now. It's washed, it's pure, and it's ready for them to fill it with life. Now think on that. Jesus and all who belong to him aren't just saved from the wrath. They're saved for a reason. God intends to give you a whole new world. And he wants us to be the kind of people who will enter into that new world together and have all 7 of those creation intentions manifest every single moment of every single day. Where it's very good. It's life eternal and life to the full, where God is personal and present among us, where we have true community with each other, where we are blessed and blessing each other, where we bear the image of Jesus himself, who is the likeness of God, and we are ruling with him the way he would have us rule. This whole story of God dealing with humans is not just academic. It's not just kindergarten, Sunday school stuff. Oh, there's animals. How many animals? 2? Oh, 7? Oh, it's not just trivia. This is God at work, dealing with a real, devastating problem called sin and making sure the new creation reality goes on. So let me finish here. And you're going to think, why did you have through verse 17 in our bulletin? Because I want to link you to a man named Abram who's coming up next. And there's 5 words I want us to think on together. And I'm putting these words up here because these are going to be not 5, sorry, 4. These are the 4 crucial concepts, realities that I want us as a church family to really dive into together. Sunday mornings, Bible studies, times of prayer. These are the hooks for everything, everybody. Creation, the new creation. Kingdom of God. Covenant, that's a biggie. We're going to dive into that next time, God willing. And community. One of them has a K, but they all sound pretty similar. It's kind of an alliteration. Creation, kingdom, covenant, community. Oh, if we could understand and dwell in these, we're going to become just like Jesus. Because this is what he's all about, everybody. So join God willing, next time let's join together. We're going to dive further into what God did through a man named Abram, because he's focused on these 4 things. He was focused on them with Noah, he's focused on them with Abram, and let me tell you, this will blow you away if you believe it. He's focused on these with you. And you're like, little old me? Yeah. But I'm not a Noah. I'm not an Abraham. I'm just little old me. So were they. And then God called them. And then they became Noah. And then they became Abram. Because they lived and walked with God. Heard his call and followed where he led. And that's what makes you big O you. Whoever you think you are right now, I want to tell you that God sees more in you than you see in yourself. Because he made that in you. And so if you embrace a man named Jesus, you aren't just saved from bad things. You're saved for amazing things. And we're meant for that together. So let's pursue a man named Jesus who has everything we need to get all this done in the best way, because we are together and forever disciples of Jesus Christ.